Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, my little dungeon that doesn't really look like a dungeon right now. I'm doing podcasty things, and I'm doing number 2, because I did number 1, and number 1 before was something that I did. We talked about trans issues with a guest star, Griffin, on my channel, and we talked about a lot of stuff. I wanted to save some topics for later, though. One that I'm going to be discussing today is Dylan Mulvaney. I believe I am saying that name correctly. For those of you who don't know, this person is a very controversial character in today's world. She's a trans woman who is getting, I'd say, 50-50 on the hate and 50-50 on love. Like, it's split between the middle. I see a lot of people in support of this person, and I also see a lot of people who really don't like this person. And I thought that I'd just kind of do a bit of a deep dive into my thoughts. I've looked into a bit of their content. I've watched some of their stuff on their opinions, and I have, I'd say, my own take on it. It might be a little bit controversial to some, and some of you may not agree with me, but that is completely fine. So I guess I'm just going to get right into it. Dylan Mulvaney, like I stated, is a trans woman, and I believe transitioned quite a while ago. And I think where all the hate stems from is just the way that they're transitioning. I think their pop started when they did a 30 days of, or maybe it wasn't 30 days, it was a certain period of, like, day 1 of being a woman, day 2 of being a woman on TikTok. And I gotta admit, it's pretty controversial. I'm just gonna say right now that I believe that this person is coming from a good place. They are probably well-intentioned, but when I first saw this person and their content that they posted, I thought that it was a parody, honestly, of and trans women. And I honestly thought that this person was just making joke videos, and then I found out that it was actually real, that this person actually believes that how they're dressing and how they're acting is how women dress and act. And I've heard a lot of different sides on this. I've heard opinions from people who are in support of Dylan, and I've heard opinions from people who are not in support of Dylan. And I'm pretty in the middle. For example, one of the things that kind of kickstarted this whole controversy with this person is their day 1 of being a woman was something along the lines of, they were sitting at a computer desk on their laptop, and they said, "Day 1 of being a woman, I've cried like 3 times today. I'm so emotional." And day 2 of being a woman, "Oh, I'm going hiking in my hiking heels," and then a bug flies by and they have this overly dramatic exclamation. They're like, "Ah, oh my god," and then they freak out and then they fall over on the ground. There was I'm probably getting these out of order too, but then there was the next one, day 4 or 5 or whatever, of being a woman. She's like, "I'm getting shit-faced, I'm a bimbo already," and stuff like that. And I'm probably misquoting just a little bit, and I do apologize for that, but I really don't want to go deep dive into this person's content again. But that is the gist of what they're making and the content that they're making. They act and dress extremely feminine. It's like their whole shtick is being a dumb bimbo. And I've heard a lot of people who say that it's not wrong of them, because that's just the way that they want to transition. That's just the woman that they want to be, and that's fair. But also, I don't know. It's done to a point that I feel is almost borderline pretty insulting. It's like, I don't know. You see a couple of people, not nearly all of them, but there are a few people, men who transition to be women, and then they have these gigantic boobs and this always wearing pink and bows and completely over the top what people consider to be feminine. And I've heard a lot of people say that they think that is not right, which I would agree. I mean, it's borderline. Oh, fudge, what's the word for it? What am I thinking of? Misogynistic? That's what it is. It's a borderline misogynistic, viewing women as, I mean, what they think of a woman is gigantic honkers and loads of makeup, being dumb and stupid and afraid of bugs. And I think that's what people don't like. And that, I guess, is what's controversial about this person, is because you can't really tell a trans person how to act. You can't tell a woman how to act or how to be a woman. Like, there's no right or wrong way to be a woman. But I also understand why people are upset that this person is transitioning and basically saying, day 2 of a woman, I've cried 3 times already. I'm so emotional. And I can understand it. I mean, that's not how all women act. That's not, women aren't necessarily emotional. It's like they take all of the stereotypes of being a woman and just amplify it to 1,000. And I think that's what people don't like. But at the same time, I feel like this person is coming from a good place, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't know this person IRL. All I can judge, and all anyone can judge off of, is the content that they post. And with that, I don't know. Honestly, guys, I don't even know if I have a final verdict. I know a lot of people don't like this person. A lot of people say that they are obsessed with, like, it's a trans woman obsessed with tampons and obsessed with periods. And that is a little weird, but I will say that I have also never seen this person actually state that they use tampons. I've heard them state a lot that they do not. I've heard them state that she carries them around for other women who might need tampons, which a lot of other women do too. Like, a lot of people carry around tampons, just in case. So I don't necessarily think that's wrong. But another thing that I've heard them go on podcasts and talk about also is their journey with girlhood. And a lot of people have gotten mad about that because they stated that you weren't a girl when you grew up. You did not grow up as a woman. You don't have the experiences of having your first period and worrying about bleeding and white pants. And a lot of people are saying that they should not be talking about girlhood because they did not experience girlhood. And with that, I do agree. I don't think that if a trans man started talking about boyhood and growing up, and the experiences of growing up as a boy, and, how hard it was being told not to cry. And it's like, if you transitioned when you were 20, can you really talk about boyhood? Because you did not experience boyhood. You did not grow up as a boy. You did not experience life as a child going through puberty as a boy. You did not experience that, just like this person did not experience girlhood. They did not experience getting their first period. They did not experience getting overly sexualized at a young age like women do. So on that end, I don't agree with them speaking on girlhood and what it's like to grow up as a girl. But I mean, can we really ever tell people what to talk about? I mean, at the end of the day, it's just, I don't know. My verdict is that they can do whatever they want, and it doesn't really affect me at all. Like, I don't really care. But people have good points about this, I will say, though. But not everyone, I feel, is looking at it objectively. I feel like a lot of people get very, very offended about the image that this woman is representing. I think completely over the top feminine. But you have to admit that, yes, while it can be seen as offensive, and what I've seen a lot of people compare it to is, is a white person painting on blackface and acting out extreme black stereotypes because that's the black person that they want to be. And some people really agree with this analogy, and some people really don't, and say that it's not at all the same thing. I'm kind of torn on it. I mean, I don't know. It's complicated. I think that there is nothing, if I'm looking at it objectively, there is nothing inherently wrong with what this person is doing. Just like if the genders were reversed and it was a trans man who was posting videos on TikTok about growing a big giant beard and getting buff and being a lumberjack and hating girly movies and saying, oh, women confuse me. I mean, I don't think they would get as much hate as this person does for acting out stereotypical female things. So on that part, I don't think that there's anything wrong with it, but I can understand where people are coming from thinking that it is a bit offensive. And honestly, y'all, there's nothing you can do about it. There's just nothing you can do. This person's going to act how they're going to act, regardless of what you want them to do. Because, and admit, a lot of people are arguing for this person, saying that there are women who act extremely girly and are afraid of bugs and cry every day, and that's true. There's very, very masculine men, and there's very, very feminine women. So I guess that's kind of my verdict on this person. We're going to move on to different topics today too, but I just kind of wanted to start off with that because it got mentioned in the Discord, and I just wanted to kind of touch on that and give my actual opinion that I have no opinion. Yeah, my opinion is non-existent. I understand why some people think that it is, offensive, stereotypical women, making fun of women. But I can also understand people who argue, but there are women like that, and they're just acting, how they want to act. That's just their personality. And then there are other people who say that this is an actor or a failed actor who just wants attention, and this is the only way they can get it, which, I can't prove you wrong or right. So whatever your opinion is, I believe that you are right to your opinion. I don't think you're necessarily wrong for that. But, yeah, controversial things. My next subject, I believe I'm going to be talking about, you'll have to forgive me too, by the way, I am very tired. I haven't really thought out this through. I just kind of sat down and said that I was going to record. I have been writing like a little bit of a blog type thing, and the start of it was the origin, well, I titled it The Origin Story, but it is, how I came to think of things the way that I do, and why a lot of people tend to think that I'm wrong, I'm an asshole, and basically why I ended up calling myself a supervillain, and I'm actually identifying with that. Not as that, with that. I'm identifying with that. I'm not actually a supervillain, even though that would be cool. But I basically started off that story, I don't really want to call it like a biography, but I'm basically going through how I grew up, like an in-depth kind of analysis on how I was raised, experiences that I went through, everything that basically led to me believing that I was transgender. And I kind of just want to go through on an audio with that, with you guys, and kind of touch on that a little bit further. Let me get rid of this TikTok of this Dylan person. So basically, what I went through in that blog, and for those of you who have been watching that, I absolutely will make more content, and I am in the middle of posting another part 2. It just takes a while sometimes, but I basically went through how I grew up, the experiences I went through in school, and from like 12, 13 to all the way to when I was 18. And what led me to think that I was transgender. And I feel like hopefully that going through that in audio and actually talking about it to you guys will maybe hopefully put a lot more of that into perspective and clear some stuff up a bit. When I was 12 or 13, I had a lot of I went through a lot of the same issues that a lot of other younger people go through. And I do list this in my little blog story. But I was a loner. I was the only goth kid in school, and it really kind of contributed to my whole mental state growing up, basically. And one of the first things that I list in my little blog here was how I couldn't make friends, and I hated it. All of the hobbies that I had were very, very masculine, were not typically considered feminine. I was very gothy. I wore very heavy black makeup. I was into heavy metal. I liked horror movies. I would go hunting and fishing all the time. And all of the hobbies that I had, I really couldn't relate to any of my friends over. Even my parents, like my mother would go with me to go do stuff, like hunting occasionally, but there was just a lot of things that I just couldn't relate to anyone else about, except for men. All of the boys in my school, they liked to play the same sports that I did. I would overhear them talking about the newest video game came out and I was thinking there sitting, hey, I've played that game. I have really, my own opinions about this. I want to get in that conversation, but I was never really treated the same way as those guys because I was a chick. I was a girl. Nobody wanted to talk about fighting or wrestling or video games or Halo or Dead Space with a girl. And I was constantly treated differently with that. And just over time, just experiencing, it's like a form of isolation almost. I had friends, but there were no one that I could actually relate to. I had maybe one or two friends that actually listened to sort of the same type of music that I listened to, but that was about it. They were always very girly. They were getting into relationships really early on, and that I just absolutely didn't understand. They would talk about, I think I listed it in my bloggy thing here too. A friend of mine had, I think at 16, had slept with someone for the first time, and she said, "Oh my God, it was amazing," and I just couldn't relate. I just absolutely didn't understand it, and that, along with everything else, really just kind of scrambled my brain. And I feel like a lot of young kids get that too. Like they feel like since they don't fit in, or they have other issues with like making friends, or say if it's a guy and they like, drama shows and things are typically considered girly, they might have a hard time fitting in with other guys, or they do, and then they'll get called gay or whatnot. And I can really understand why a lot of kids nowadays have the issues that they have. But I also think that the problem is, and I stated this in the previous little podcast that I did, that we should not be encouraging children to figure out almost like what's wrong with them, right? Like say if a kid says, "I'm not comfortable with my body, I don't like it," say like a 15 or 16-year-old girl states that they're not comfortable with their body, they don't like it, they don't like the changes they're going through, they don't like how society views them. And that was a lot of that is similar to the stuff that I went through when I was a kid. A lot of times nowadays they'll be encouraged to either transition, or they're like, well, maybe you're non-binary. Maybe if you don't like your boobs, maybe you're transgender, or anything along those lines. And I really think that I might get a lot of flack for this, but I really think that that's very, very harmful, and that we really should not be encouraging children to make changes to their bodies or identify as this, that, and the third when they're young. And your body is changing so much through those ages. You're going through puberty, and being uncomfortable with your body really needs to be normalized. Because if you ask anybody in their 20s or 30s or 40s, anybody who is no longer a teenager, right? If they were ever completely 100% comfortable when they were growing up, I guarantee you that you will not find anyone who will say that. And if they do, they are full of shit. They are full of shit. When you grow up and you're going through puberty, all of that stuff can be very uncomfortable. All of the changes that your body goes through. I mean, name one woman who liked going through her first period. Like, it doesn't exist. Name one guy who enjoyed getting random boners in class. you know? And I mean, sure, there might be some, but they might be considered a bit of a freak. But not not a lot of people really enjoy, puberty and going through those ages. And telling kids that, or basically convincing them if they're uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form that it's not normal, I feel is very, very harmful. And I feel like that's something that's really leading to a lot of children identifying as something other than their biological gender, because they feel that since they're uncomfortable and they're having, issues, maybe issues with their friends or their or identity or who they want to be, that they feel that since they're having those issues, that there must mean that there's something wrong with them. That must mean that they must identify as something else, when in reality, you're just normal. It's okay to not feel comfortable. And I feel like that's not something that people really acknowledge nowadays. A lot of people are really kind of pushing this whole transgender thing. And don't get me wrong, there are people who are actually transgender, right? Truly transgender. But it is not nearly as many as the people who are identifying as it, if that makes any sense. Like I really do feel like a lot of the kids, especially, mostly younger people who identify as trans and go on hormone blockers, are probably not actually transgender. And this whole affirm everyone, don't ever ask questions or you're transphobic, I feel like that whole thing is just really, really harmful. And something that I've really noticed, and another thing that I talked about in my previous podcast, but I didn't really go that much into detail about, is people in the LGBT community who identify as something other than male or female, or their biological gender. Let me be specific. A lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people that I've noticed, especially young people, and I'm mostly talking about teenagers, right? Kids who are still developing and they want to identify as something, even very young adults. They hate being questioned. And I really feel like that's a problem, because if you're never questioned on anything, how are you ever supposed to find out that you're wrong? I mean, how are you ever supposed to figure out if what you're doing is not actually right for you if nobody will ever question you on it? And I feel like that's why a lot of people don't like going to therapists and going and to see someone about their mental health issues, because they don't like being questioned. It's uncomfortable. And they don't like having somebody tell them that they might be wrong, or they don't like somebody asking them, yeah, well, why do you actually feel this way? What's actually going on? Because I feel like a lot of people who transition or identify as something other than what their biological gender is, especially when they're younger, have a lot of other issues going on. And I'm mostly speaking from personal experience. I was absolutely convinced that when I was 18 or so, I was absolutely convinced that I was transgender. And that's why when some people comment on my videos and they say, yeah, but you weren't actually trans, you shouldn't say that you were trans. Granted, yeah, no, I wasn't actually trans. But back then when I was transitioning, I was convinced. And damn near nobody could convince me otherwise. But I also had no one in my life actually question me about it. I told my family that I wanted to transition and that I was going to be a guy, and they said, oh, good for you, cool. What's your new name? And there's not that there's anything inherently wrong with that, but nobody, not even the doctors who I got my hormones from, nobody who I talked to get top surgery about, throughout my entire transition, no one, not a single person, ever questioned me on why I transitioned in the first place, and actually really asked me why I thought I was trans. And I'm actually pretty convinced that if I had actually sat down with someone and talked about the reasons why I was transitioning, they would be able to probably tell me that that doesn't sound like a really good reason to transition. Because my reasons, sorry, I got a stuffy nose, my reasons for transitioning were not the right ones. Let's just say that. I had transitioned, and I stated this in my little blog here too. I had transitioned because I was going through a lot of identity disorder, like, well, not disorders, but identity issues. And it all kind of started, and I mentioned this earlier when my friend of mine had talked about sleeping with someone for the first time, and all my friends were getting relationships, and I was having all these issues with that. And it was around that time, and I was around 16, that I had started to realize that I wasn't attracted to people the same way that other people were. And I had issues with that, because I was confused. I knew that something was off about me, but I just didn't know what. I just didn't know what my issue was. And I had gone through high school all the way until I was 18, identifying as all sorts of different things. Well, me not identifying, but I considered myself bisexual when I realized that I wasn't really attracted to men. And then I realized that, well, I'm not attracted to men at all, so I'm a lesbian. And then I realized that, wait, I don't really want to date women either. And so then I went back and I was like, oh, well, maybe I'm pansexual. Maybe that just means I just like everyone. Or in my head, I thought that it meant I didn't like everyone equally. So it meant that I was pansexual, when in reality, I finally stumbled across the term asexual. And for a while, that really helped me out with my identity issues, because I was like, oh, well, I'm just not attracted to anyone. And for a very, very long time, that really fit me. But that just because I had an identity didn't mean that it solved the issues I was having, like all the mental things that I was going through. I still had issues, and just picking up and slapping an identity on myself did not fix those issues. I feel like a lot of people these days think that if they just figure themselves out, like what they are, it'll fix all the issues that they're having, either with their family or their friends or socially, and it's not true. Just slapping an identity on yourself is not going to solve your problems. And I found that out pretty much the hard way, because like I said, for a while I was identifying as asexual, and I wasn't happy with it, mostly because I wanted a relationship and everything like that. But with me being asexual, it's like I knew that I was asexual, but it didn't actually help myself out at all. I didn't like how I was overly sexualized. I didn't like how everyone was asking why I was single. I would constantly get asked out, or people would flirt with me, and it would make me uncomfortable because I didn't want that kind of attention. I just wanted to, play games and do my hobbies and do the things that I like without all of that overly aggressive female attention that I was getting. And I've included pictures there, but I wasn't bad looking. I'm not going to say that I was a supermodel or anything, but I wasn't unattractive. And so I got a lot of comments that I didn't like. A lot of it was from older men. A lot of it was from people online. And I don't know, it just made me really uncomfortable. And since it made me uncomfortable, I kind of eventually got it into my head that maybe there's something else wrong with me. And then that's when I discovered the whole transgender movement. And I had looked up people who had transitioned from female to male, and I was fascinated. I mean, it was just this whole new world that I absolutely had no idea about. And I took a deep dive. And I had some friends in high school growing up that were transgender, but I didn't really know that much about it. I wasn't really that close with them to begin with. They're just my classmates, essentially. But I'd kind of rediscovered it almost once I thought that it might apply to me. And then I saw it in a completely different light. I had looked up success stories, and just everyone that I saw who had transitioned, who was like a public figure online, like a transgender public figure, had seemed so happy in who they were. I mean, I was just fascinated with the idea of being a guy. And it wasn't even necessarily that I had body dysphoria. And I feel like that's where a lot of people go wrong, especially when younger people transition, is they transition for the wrong reasons. A lot of people confuse, just like I did, I feel a lot of people confuse body dysphoria with other issues socially that they're having, because they want an escape. They want to figure out what's wrong with them. They want to fix so badly that they do a little bit of mental gymnastics to try and convince themselves that the issues they're having it's just because they're trans. Oh, I have body dysphoria, so I should transition. I had convinced myself that I had body dysphoria because I said, well, I don't like the attention that I'm getting. Oh, sorry, I've had too much caffeine. Because I didn't like the attention that I was getting as a woman. I didn't like how people had overly sexualized me. I didn't like how other people saw my body. I didn't necessarily have an issue with my body. I wasn't uncomfortable in my skin. My issue was with how other people saw me and how other people treated me. And I had said, oh, well, that must mean that I'm uncomfortable. No, that's where I went wrong. And that's really kind of what I feel like a lot of people don't take into consideration is that it's not that I was uncomfortable. I did not have body dysphoria, but I was uncomfortable with how other people saw me and how other people viewed my body as a woman. And I had confused that, with body dysphoria, when in reality that was not how it was at all. And then I had thought that, well, if I was a guy, I wouldn't be seen like this, and I wouldn't have to deal with these issues. And, that sounds nice. I thought that since that I didn't want the attention of a woman, that meant that I must be a guy, that I must be transgender. And that's kind of where everything kind of went downhill in the best of ways. And that might sound a little bit confusing, but I had realized, I had kind of went down this like deep dark rabbit hole of the transgender community and being transgender. And I had seen all these success stories, women who have gone on testosterone and before and after pictures, and they looked so good. And I became fascinated, like, what would I look like if I transitioned? What would I look like as a guy? I was just obsessed with it. It was almost like a character build sheet in a video game. You can like, if anybody has played the Dark Souls series or Elden Ring, you get to build your character, the perks, the attributes, what you look like, you can kind of create another person to play as. And I was really kind of fascinated with that idea because I thought that, well, if I transition, I can be whoever I want to be. I can be a completely different person. I can change my name. I can act, however I want, which was essentially almost like borderline changing my entire personality. And I was just fascinated with the idea of it was almost like I could start over, when in reality, spoiler alert, it doesn't work like that, but that's what I had gotten into my head. I had gotten it in and convinced myself that, hey, I want to start over. I don't want to be a girl anymore. I want to change my name. I want to be a different person. It'll solve my issues. Everything will go away. And that's not how it works, unfortunately. But once I realized that, I just became obsessed with it. I mean, granted, nobody had, like I said it earlier, nobody had ever questioned me and asked me why I thought I was transgender, which I feel like is something that I don't really hear a lot. I hear a lot of affirmation, but I don't ever hear why very often. I don't really hear a lot of people genuinely asking people who think they're trans, why do you think you're transgender? What are your symptoms? Tell me exactly why you think that you were in the wrong body. Like, explain to me. And I really wish that I had someone ask me that back then, but the past is in the past. But I mean, if you do have somebody who is transitioning, please just ask them why. Explain to them that you're not being transphobic at all, that you are only trying to be completely supportive and make sure that they're making the right decision for themselves, but get them to talk about it. Get them to explain exactly why they think that they're transgender. And I feel like if we start doing that, if we ask questions before we just automatically affirm people, I feel like it'll solve a lot of problems, especially if it's in like a therapy setting with somebody who's a professional, and is trained to deal with that kind of stuff and, decipher all of our mental quirks that we have. But moving on, after I had kind of taken my deep dive into the transgender community, I was pretty convinced. I was like, yeah, I really want to do this. This sounds amazing. I'll finally have my own identity. I really felt like that's what the issue was. I was like, this is my problem. I need to transition, and that will solve all of my issues. And I called, I think a week later, I spent like a week talking about it. or thinking about it. I didn't tell anybody, but I ordered a binder and I called Planned Parenthood because I read that you could get hormones pretty easily there. And I told them, I made an appointment. I went in person. I said, hey, I'm transgender. I need to get on hormones. And they pretty much said, cool, we'll send over a prescription. It'll be ready in a week. And that was literally it. I know that in other countries it is a bit more difficult to get hormones and HRT and hormone therapy there, but that was not so in my case. It's not so in a lot of other people's cases. A lot of the times it is very, very easy to get hormone replacement therapy, especially for young people who are not questioned at all. I'm not exactly sure what it's the case for minors, but I'm pretty sure you can go to Planned Parenthood and just get hormones whenever you want, or a regular doctor's office. And so that's what I did. I went on hormones and I told my parents, I said, hey, I'm transgender, I'm identifying as a guy, I'm changing my name. And they, I feel, were afraid to question me on it. I feel like with how people are treated these days, everyone is so quick to jump to, oh, you're transphobic, or oh, you're homophobic, or anything like that, if you even remotely question them whatsoever about it. And I really feel like my family they just wanted to be seen as the good parents, the ones who are accepting and wholesome, and they wanted to be the good guys so badly that they didn't question anything about it, and they just rolled with it. They said, okay, cool, what's your new name? I'll do my best to support you with that. And that, I will say, is not my parents' problem. It was not their fault, because I was 18 when I decided to go on hormones and transition. It is none of their business to tell me no. It was not their business to say, like, it wasn't their job to question me, because I was 18 and I was legally an adult. If I was younger, if I was a minor, then yes, I do think that it is your job as a parent to highly, highly question and take your child to therapy if they decide that they want to transition and they think that's right for them. Take them to therapy, make them talk about it. I should have gone to therapy, but I didn't. And since I was 18, nobody could force me to. Okay, but if somebody is a minor, please, before they do transition or do anything, please take them to therapy and get them actual, honest to God help. And make sure that they're making those right decisions before you do anything like that, because medically transitioning is very permanent in a lot of ways, and a lot of that is stuff that is completely irreversible. If you get top surgery, it doesn't matter. You cannot go back. You can't just re-glue your breasts back together. If you get bottom surgery, that is completely irreversible, and you will never get that back. Even just going on hormones, you can have hair loss. Your voice will deepen or raise sometimes if it's female or male to female. Your body will change in a lot of ways that it will never go back to. So don't think that, going on hormones is just them finding themselves, right? A lot of that stuff is very irreversible and is very, very permanent, and needs to be a decision that is seriously thought over a long period of time, and honestly is not something that minors should be even doing. I mean, I feel like people, especially like kids, should dress how they want, identify how they want, but anything medically changing, anything permanent like that, like hormones and top surgery, leave that for when you're at least 18 or over. Like, if we can't tattoo our children, if tattooing kids is considered abuse, and if you can't give a 16-year-old a boob job without being seen as a terrible parent, how could chopping their boobs off and getting top surgery be any different? So please do not do anything medically altering to your children, or allow them to, until they are 18. Stick it out. You might get some hate for it, but just know in your soul that you are doing the right thing. And people need to go through puberty and go through all of these changes and let their body develop fully before they make any permanently altering decisions like that. But after I had gone on hormones, I didn't want, this is a bit of a cop out and it's not something that a lot of people know, but oh gosh, caffeine. I had a job at the time. I was working at a drugstore. I'll just say that. And I was terrified of coming out. I did not want to come out as a trans man to them. I absolutely didn't want to do it. So before I publicly transitioned, I got hormones and everything, but I still acted like a woman at work. And before I had actually publicly transitioned, I had put in for a transfer at my job, and I moved about 4 hours away from where I lived, 4 hours away from anybody I had ever known. And after I moved to the new city, that's when I transitioned publicly. I had changed my name completely. I was on hormones. I was wearing binders all the time. And I was publicly identifying completely as a guy. I had male roommates, and I never got questioned on it once. After a few months, my voice dropped, and I passed fairly well. I didn't get misgendered at all. And any time that I did, it's because I just looked really, really young. I looked like a 13-year-old boy. And somebody would come up and say, ma'am. But then I'd say, how can I help you, with a really deep voice, and they'd be like, oh, sorry, sir, and then they'd recognize that I was a guy, or that I was identifying as a guy. And I never really had any issues with that. But yes, I completely copped out. I'm a chicken, I will admit. I moved, and I never actually came out to anyone besides my family. Not anybody at work. I didn't have to do that. Granted, I did have to do that when I detransitioned. I couldn't get out of that one. I couldn't afford to move cities again. I did have to come out when I detransitioned to my coworkers, but that is something for later on down the road. Now, everything keeps popping up on my PC. Oh my god. But, yes, I had moved, and this is part of the story that gets a little bit bland, so I'm going to skip over it. But yeah, I was working a 9-to-5 job. I was a shift lead at a drugstore, and I had my own apartment. I was living, with roommates, but I had moved out. I was living as a guy. I didn't get misgendered, and I did that for about a year on hormones too. So I was medically transitioning for a year. After about a year, I had sought out a therapist because I had finally decided that I wanted to move forward with getting top surgery. And this is a pretty important turning point in my life because I didn't go, and I actually got approved for top surgery too because I sought out a therapist and I said, hey, I want to get top surgery. And they wrote me a note to insurance and I got approved. It was right at this point that thinking about getting top surgery and cutting my boobs off really made me think about if I actually wanted to, because I didn't actually go and see a therapist and get get approved for top surgery because I wanted to. And this might be a little bit confusing. I didn't actually think about it and because it was something that I wanted to do or because I had dysphoria. It was because, I'm a trans man. And so naturally, the next thing that I have to do is get top surgery. It was just something that almost like an initiation. It's like if you want to be considered a trans man and actually trans, you have to get top surgery. You have to cover up your boobs or you're not actually trans, right? That was the thought process that I had seen everywhere else. And so naturally, that was like, okay, that's the next thing that I have to do. I thought bottom surgery was going to be very, very expensive. And so I wasn't really concerned about that. But once I actually got approved for top surgery, it really made me actually think about it. And that's when I realized for myself that I didn't actually want to. And it was really confusing because I realized that I didn't want to, but I refused to believe that I didn't want to. Because in my head, I was thinking, no, I'm trans. I have to want to. I can't be a trans man who wants to have boobs, right? And so in the back of my head, this is kind of when my doubt started to form, was when I started the process of getting top surgery. And I had realized that I didn't really want to. And throughout this whole process, I could have gotten top surgery at any point. I got approved for everything. All I had to do was set the date, essentially, to go and get it. But I put it off, and I put it off, and I put it off, and I justified it by saying, oh, it's financial issues, it's money issues, I'd have to take time off of work, and I just put it off and off and off and off. And during this time, I really started to have more serious doubts. And it was because of me not wanting to get top surgery. I would pass by the makeup aisle and at the store, and I'd think back to when I did my makeup, and then I'd kind of reminisce me like, oh man, I looked so good. And I really I started to miss things about being a girl that I hadn't really missed before. Because it had been a year, and granted, when I lived as a guy, I liked it, you know? There were definitely perks. I didn't have to deal with that many issues, you know? It was a sense of comfort in identifying as a man, because socially speaking, men are strong. They're supposed to be the protectors. People think that men don't get assaulted as much, or mugged or robbed, when actually that's not true. But there was just a sense of comfort, you know, in identifying as a man and being seen socially as a man versus a woman. I got talked to differently. I was treated differently by other men, and it was really nice for a while. It was something that I really, really enjoyed. But that only lasts for so long before I start to miss actually being me again. And it sounds really backwards, because at that time, like, being a trans man, that was me. Like, that I fully identified as that. I was on hormones and everything. But even something in the back of my mind just constantly had kind of wiggled its way in there and said, what if you're not, though? And I hadn't really realized that that's what it was at the time, but I had found myself missing parts of being a girl. And even when I started to branch out into the dating scene was when I got really confused, because I thought that, well, I identify as a man now, so naturally my asexuality should change, right? But I started to think, well, even if it did, who would I go out with as a guy? Because the whole reason for my transition was my issues with identity, you know, like my sexual identity with who I'm attracted to. Am I asexual? Am I gay? Am I straight? What? I was very confused, and I was not happy with being asexual. That's kind of what led to me transitioning. It was a domino effect, but that was the starting point. And so towards the end of my transition, that is what it all came back to, was the issue that led to me transitioning in the first place, was my sexual identity. And some of my coworkers had encouraged me to get on Tinder, and I was like, shit, well, who would I even be attracted to? Like, who would I even try to get with, you know? And I thought about it, and I was like, well, I can't see myself as a man attracted to other men, so I ruled out being gay. But I also couldn't see myself as a trans man being with a woman. So I was like, well, I don't know what the fuck's wrong with me. And that's kind of where I had my issues. I just didn't know exactly where I fit. And I was like, well, now things are even more confusing, because I didn't want to be asexual. I didn't want to be asexual as a cis woman, and I didn't want to be asexual as a trans man. And since I didn't fix the issue that I had before I transitioned, it all came back around full circle, and I still ended up dealing with that issue. That's why I really encourage everyone, if you're thinking about transitioning, really look at why you're transitioning and really kind of figure out exactly what's going on with you first. Like, if you have other issues, besides like body dysphoria, like I did. I had issues, and I had a real problem with how I was seen socially as a woman. I did not fix that with me before I transitioned, and if I did, I wouldn't have transitioned at all. So naturally, since I hadn't fixed the issues I was dealing with before, I just painted over it with the trans brush. But just because I painted over it does not erase what was underneath before. And so it is still there, And I had found myself dealing with this issue. And I had said, well, I'm just going to forget about it. And for about 2 months, I would say 2 or 3 months, because it's been a little over a year since I was on hormones officially at that point. And so I just said, I don't know what my issue is, but I don't like thinking about it. It makes me uncomfortable. So I'm going to not think about it at all. And I said that it makes me uncomfortable because the more that I thought about it, the more that thought of maybe you're not actually trans, the maybe I was wrong thought started to wiggle itself back from the back of my brain. It started to wiggle itself forward the more I thought about what my problem was. The I miss being a girl thoughts that I would have randomly throughout the day, the issues that I had with dating, all of that kind of led to this maybe I was wrong, maybe I shouldn't have transitioned thought. And that thought to me was so scary. That thought was terrifying. I did not want to be wrong because I had already done so much to my body socially. Just being wrong was just a terrifying thought, and I absolutely did not want to have to deal with that. So I just shoved it into the back of my brain for about 2 months, and I refused to acknowledge it or deal with it. But it got so bad that I ended up giving myself dysphoria, meaning that I was not actually transgender. Despite how much I had convinced myself that I was before, I was not actually transgender. And for me, it was only a little over a year. For other people, it might be a few years. It might be 5 or 6 years, or it might only be a few months. But for me, it was about a year and a half afterwards that I had started to realize that I was wrong and that I was not actually transgender. And like I said, that thought was very, very scary. I had just, I don't know, when I realized it, my brain kind of completely shit itself. I will be honest. And how I discovered it, because I had refused to acknowledge that thought process for, like I said, a few months. And then I basically it had gotten so uncomfortable. Like it got to the point where I would wake up and I was just upset for no reason. I didn't want to do the things that I wanted that I had done before, like being a guy, identifying how I wanted to. It got so uncomfortable for me that I just missed being a woman so much. And like I said, I had given myself dysphoria to the point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. It got worse and it got worse and it got worse. I thought I could deal with it. I couldn't. It was miserable. And I literally sat myself down on the bed and I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, do I want to be trans? Am I actually transgender? Like, do I miss being a woman? I had to sit down and face that question, which had scared me so much up until this point. And I had kind of had a little bit of a mini breakdown when I realized that I do miss being a woman. I don't want to be transgender anymore. And yes, I was wrong. And then I kind of, in that moment, I had that little holding your head in your hands moment, like, oh my God, what have I done to myself? And I refused to detransition. It sounds backwards, but I had realized that I was no longer transgender. And like my hair was borderline a buzz cut. I looked like a guy. I was having like receding hairline issues. Thankfully, it has come back for me and I don't have those issues anymore. But my voice was super deep. And I sat there and I thought to myself, motherfucker, I was wrong. I have done all of these things to my body that at the time I did not believe were reversible. I said, if I detransition and if I go back to being a woman, I will be misgendered as my own gender. I thought that if I go back and I detransition at this point, people will think that I'm a trans woman when I'm not. And that thought was just terrifying to me. I thought, my God, I'm going to have to I'm going to have to come out to people at my work. They're not going to believe me. They're going to think that I'm a trans woman, and that because people there had believed that I was a biological male. People at my work did not know that I was transgender. I sure as shit wouldn't be able to live with my male roommates because they didn't know either. And they had stated before that they were not okay with living with a woman. So that was awkward. And I basically had decided that, you know what, I was wrong, but I'm in too deep now. There's no turning back for me. Fuck it, I'm done. For about 2 weeks, I had refused to detransition. I was like, I've gone so far. This is just the way it is now. And like I said, I had done that for about 2 weeks until I realized that, you know what, I'd rather be misgendered. I can't do this anymore. And that is when I started looking for other apartments. It took about a month, and I kept up, my trans act, and it wasn't act at that point, because at that point I knew that I wasn't transgender, but I couldn't detransition yet at that point, because I did not feel like it was a safe environment for me to do so. So I put in for apartments. I let my roommates know that I was moving out, and as soon as I moved out into my own apartment with no roommates or nothing, it was a little one bedroom. It was $600 a month. It was all I could afford. And as soon as I did that, that's when I ordered myself my famous little green wig that I wore in all of my early videos that everyone seems to miss so much. Sorry, it's not going back. I'm sorry. But I did that. I ordered girly clothes for the first time ever. First time in like a year, but it felt like forever, and it felt so weird. I went to the store and I ordered makeup, and the little clerk, because I was shopping dressed as a guy, like I looked like a guy in the makeup department, and that made me really uncomfortable too. I was like, fuck, they probably think that I'm some weirdo shopping for makeup, when in reality nobody cares. But yeah, and then I had made up some story about, oh, it's for my friend, we're doing a gender bend thing, I need makeup for him, and I feel like they didn't quite believe me. But yeah, so I had bought makeup. It was all the cheapest shit I could find, and girl clothes and a wig, and then I did my makeup, and God, and that's when I kind of realized that, yes, I really do miss being a woman. Even back then, it was still very weird for me, because my voice is very deep, and I felt it was weird. I missed being a woman, but I felt strange in my own skin again, because I was biologically female, but I looked and presented like a guy. So when I put on makeup, I felt like a guy wearing makeup, and like a full face of makeup, and it felt really weird, even though biologically I am a woman. And putting on makeup and making myself look like a woman should feel natural, should feel normal, right? Because I wasn't actually trans, but no, it felt so weird. It felt so out of place. I was very out of practice, and it was a struggle, because for the first few weeks of me not taking testosterone, it was hard. Like I said, it was just that constant mental battle of and it's so complex too, because in my head, I was thinking I was transgender, but I was wrong. I am biologically a woman, but since I've taken hormones, I look like, very, very clearly look like a guy. So when I put on makeup to make myself look like my biological gender, I feel like a dude wearing makeup, because I look like a guy even though I'm biologically feminine. And it was very, very confusing, but I pushed through. I was too chicken to identify as back as a woman and detransition for the first couple of weeks. I think it was a month or two later, I had gotten better at doing my makeup, and I had gotten to the point where I felt it was still very, very scary to go out in public with makeup on, because you could tell. I mean, it's weird, because I am biologically female, but wearing makeup at work, I felt like people could they thought that I was a trans woman. Like I feel like, and I got comments about that too. Like, even when I did my makeup so well that I looked female and feminine, as soon as I opened my mouth and my voice came out, they would look at me weird, be like, oh, you're one of those. And there's nothing wrong with being a trans woman, but that's just the looks that I got. And it was very frustrating, but I had to suck it up. And I said, this is what I did to myself. This is what I'm dealing with. And I just forced myself to deal with it. And that lasted for, I want to say, about a good 6 months. And honestly, that part of it for me has never ended. I still get misgendered over the phone. There are still people, like when I used to do gaming over on Twitch, there's still people who would come in, hear my voice be a little bit deeper, and they'd be like, oh, you're a dude, you're a trans woman, nah. And I'd get a lot of trashy comments about that. I still do. About people who don't believe that I'm a woman. It's quite incredible. But yeah, that is something that I still deal with, and that I will probably always deal with. So that is something permanent that I have not been able to conquer yet. But yeah, I detransitioned after like a month at work publicly. I had said, yo, everybody, psych. I was actually trans the whole time, and now I'm detransitioning. And you know how complicated it was? Like, I don't know why it was so hard for people to grasp the idea that I was not trans and that I'm going back to my biological gender. Like, a lot of people just thought that I was a trans woman. Be like, oh, you're transitioning. No, I'm not transitioning. I am detransitioning. And for a lot of people who, especially people who weren't familiar with any LGBT concepts and anything like that, it was very hard for people to understand. Some people just thought that I was a trans woman and that was that, and I just got tired of trying to explain it correctly, and so I just gave up. But I transitioned and I came out at work, and it was one of the hardest things I think I've ever done. Mostly because I didn't have, like I said earlier, I didn't have any friends or family where I lived. If it went south and if it went badly, I really didn't have a backup plan. If I got a lot of hate at work, I would just have to deal with it until I got a new job. My name, fun fact, I haven't even changed my name and gender on my driver's license. Because going to the DMV sucks ass, and I don't want to. But yeah, my name, picture, and gender on my driver's license was the one from when I was a guy. And buying alcohol at the store was an issue. I got looks all the time. Anytime that I went to a restaurant and ordered a margarita, I'd have to whip out my ID, and then I would get self-conscious because I looked at that point, like a few months after I had detransitioned, I had gotten to the point where I felt comfortable going out socially, where I feel like as long as I don't say anything, as long as I don't open my mouth, people will believe that I'm a woman. But going out and, anytime I had to whip out my ID, it was an issue for me because I had just a lot of issues with my, with appearing as transgender when I wasn't, which is really ironic because I didn't have an issue, with people knowing that I was trans when I was actually trans, but I really didn't want people to think that I was transgender when I wasn't. And I don't quite know what was up with that. I still don't know why exactly I was uncomfortable like that back then. But it was a point of contention and it was something that I constantly dealt with, and something that I still deal with today because, like I said, I haven't changed my ID from when it was before. I just got used to it. And I don't really care at this point. But, yeah. And then I detransitioned, and I was in my first apartment, and that's when I made my first detransition video. That popped, and I think it has like 1.8 million views, and I absolutely had no idea that it was going to do that well. It was insane. You guys, I had no idea how to deal with that kind of attention. I tried to respond to comments. A lot of them were positive. Some of them were very, very negative. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Being a social media influencer and doing YouTube and Twitch is my job right now. It's how I get paid. It's how I support myself. I don't have a regular 9-to-5. This is what I do. And I'm happy with what I'm doing. But before I uploaded that one video, I never wanted to be a YouTuber. I never wanted to be a social media influencer like all those other people. They wanted to do they want to be famous. They want to be this big YouTuber or a big streamer. And I never wanted to do that. I wanted to be a biomedical engineer. I was going to go to college. I was thinking about going to UW for biomedical engineering because I was really fascinated about prosthetics. I wanted to do that. I really wanted to do something that I felt was, meaningful with my life and very fulfilling. I like puzzles. I like building things, and I wanted to go to college. I never wanted to be a social media influencer, it's just really crazy how life has kind of taken me in that direction, because a lot of other people on this platform, they post a YouTube video or YouTube videos, right? People who are very successful because they wanted to do this. They grinded it up from the ground up, and they really wanted to be, a YouTuber, and they really wanted to make this their career, and they did, and they're very successful with it. And people who have, who are successful with YouTube or on Twitch or TikTok or whatever, they make videos on there because they want to do it. I made my first video out of what I felt back then was obligation, because when I was detransitioning and I was really nervous about it, I looked up content about detransitioning, and I only found one video that I felt helped me. That was about Elle Palmer, and she's great. And she was a detransitioner too. And she honestly is amazing because she gave me the confidence to detransition at all in the first place. But yeah, there was just no content about detransition out there. So I was like, well, I'm going to make a video and just post my story out there because I feel like it needed to be said, And so I posted it. I expected to maybe get 5 views. That's it. I did not think it was going to go anywhere. And then the next thing I know, I wake up and it has like 30,000 views. And then a week later, it had 500,000 views. And then a couple months down the line, it had like 1 million views. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. Oh my God. It was insane. I did not expect any sort of a pop like that. And so then I made, a follow-up video, questions and answers, and that one did really well too. And then I said, oh, well, maybe I should make other videos, about detransition, like educational things, to, let people know that we exist, that detransition is a thing, that you shouldn't rush into transition, because I didn't really see anybody talking about it. And so that's why I made my videos on the internet in the first place. And I swear all of this is going somewhere, I promise. But in doing so, I got successful enough to where I was able to quit my 9-to-5 job and do this for a living. And I'm very grateful to be doing this. Don't get me wrong. No, it is not my dream job. I still would love to go to college and do all that stuff. Unfortunately, it's not in the cards for me right now. This is my job, is educating you guys. Or maybe not educating, but speaking my trashy opinion. Yeah, that's more accurate. That's more accurate, yeah. And it is now what I do for a living, is being an asshole on the internet. And it's fun. Don't get me wrong. But I have learned a lot doing so. My first little bout and journey on the internet lasted until I got to around 90,000 subscribers. And the internet to me was still very scary. I didn't want to say anything that would get me canceled. And I knew I was already on thin ice being a detransitioner on YouTube, because that's not allowed, right? A lot of detransitioners get a lot of hate for detransitioning. A lot of the transgender community believes that me and us detransitioners automatically is like a stain on their community, and that makes us transphobic because we detransitioned, when in reality that's not the case. Just because it was not right for me does not mean it's not right for anybody else. But a lot of people in that community don't like what I have to say. They don't like me saying that we should question people, and you should seek therapy before you transition. They don't like the fact that I don't think we should transition children. And that was all stuff that I was a little bit afraid to say at first. Like I said, the first 90,000 subscribers that I had, I was a bit of a different personality on the internet. I just wanted to be a wholesome, supportive detransitioner who, like, I'm not transphobic or anything, but I really think we should think about this and, think of the children, it was all that stuff. And I tried my best to appeal to everyone. And I never said anything that I didn't agree with. Like, I would never state an opinion that I didn't actually have just because I wanted people to like me. Like, I would never say that we should transition children, and that trans kids should be accepted just because I think that's what the public would want me to say. I would never say something that people just wanted to hear. I always spoke my opinion, but I tended to sugarcoat things a lot because, like I said, when I first got that pop on YouTube from my detransition video, I didn't know at all what I was doing. I didn't know how to YouTube. I had never even heard of Twitch before. I had no idea what any of this stuff was. I just filmed the video on my phone and uploaded it raw. No editing, no thumbnail, nothing. And I just uploaded it. I didn't know how to do the internet. And so I was learning when I was uploading content and gaining subscribers, but I still had no idea what I was doing. And I was really afraid to do something wrong that would get me canceled. So I ended up sugarcoating things a lot. And I would say things that, well, I wouldn't say things, like I said, I wouldn't say things that I didn't agree with. But I didn't say everything that I wanted to say. Because a lot of the opinions that I have, and that I feel like a lot of the opinions that other people have, they're kind of afraid to state. Like a lot of people who think that we shouldn't make kids medically transition. We shouldn't be transitioning young kids. Liking rainbows doesn't automatically make you gay. Like, I mean, a lot of ridiculous shit that might just make sense to you and me might get you canceled on a different platform. Tweeting something, if you're, tweeting something about the LGBT community that might not be a popular opinion. And granted, I'm not talking about being an asshole. Let me make that clear. I am not talking about being a blatantly rude on the internet. I'm not talking about saying, oh, trans people don't exist and, God hates gays. That's fucked up. And if you think that, you seriously, I believe, need to reconsider your opinions and your stances and try to not be as much of a shitty human being as you are. But there are still opinions, like not every trans person is actually trans. A lot of trans people, young trans people on the internet, do it for attention. Like, I mean, it's the same thing. There's a lot of TikToks nowadays about younger people faking mental disorders like DID and Tourette's. There's a lot of people who have been outed and have been caught red-handed faking disorders for attention because it's their personality when they don't have it. There's a lot of self-diagnosis going on with young people, and that needs to stop, and it's wrong. And you cannot self-diagnose yourself. Like a 17-year-old girl cannot self-diagnose DID. And faking something like Tourette's in itself is just rude and wrong and very, very cringy. And you can say that about them, but a lot of people will absolutely come for you if you say that some young people are faking their gender identities for attention because they want to have, their thing, their moment. They want to blend in. They want to have a community. So they fake being transgender, or they transition, or they call themselves by a different name when they're not actually transgender. And again, let me state, this is not everyone. There are people who legitimately suffer from body dysphoria, and that transitioning actually helps them cope and helps them lead fulfilling lives. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the young people with bright ass colored hair who are very, very attention seeking and have the wonkiest, wildest gender identities that you can imagine. And they're the types of people who say you have to say Zed or Zir or whatever pronoun that they have, or you're blank phobic. The people who say you have to say I'm this and you have to respect my pronouns, or you're an asshole. It's those types of people. You can't really, it's almost like it's illegal to say anything even remotely negative about the LGBT community. And it's like you can't criticize it at all. My videos on my other channel, this channel in particular, have been basically demonetized for me criticizing the LGBT community. And I'm not spreading hate. I'm not being transphobic or anything, but some of my videos have been demonetized for saying, no, a trans man can't be a lesbian, or no, doing sports is not going to make you more of a man, like biologically. Like, a lot of this stuff is really stupid, but I get demonetized for talking about it. And I just kind of had to learn, that it doesn't matter what you say on the internet. There will always be somebody who hates you. There's always going to be somebody who disagrees with you, or who thinks that you're a terrible person for your opinion or your take. And so, like I said, once I got around to 90,000 subscribers, and I had kind of learned that in particular, that no matter what I do, there will always be somebody who hates me. There will always be a group of people who thinks I'm the devil or the worst person or a supervillain, So it was right around then, and recently, where I had just decided to own it. If speaking my mind about my detransition, if being, open and honest about what I had gone through, if, saying that we shouldn't transition kids, if criticizing, no matter how friendly or how nice, if criticizing a community like the LGBT community is going to make me the villain and make me a supervillain, and I'm going to be the bad guy, fuck it, I'm the bad guy. Sorry, I might as well just be a supervillain. And so that's what led to my channel change. I officially changed everything over to Supervillain Salty, because I just had to realize that you will never please everyone. Like, there will always be someone who says you're a piece of shit. No matter how logical it may seem. Like, I had filmed a video about an hour earlier, actually, about something called MAPS. It's called minor attracted people. It's people who are adults, legal adults, and who identify as being attracted to minors, aka the pedo word. I don't think YouTube will like me if I say that much. And yeah, 99% of people say that's fucked up. That's wrong. You leave children alone. You're a predator, things like that. But there's always going to be that 1% of people who say, no, they're just identifying, they can't help who they're attracted to. There will always be that 1% that disagree with you, regardless of how much it might not make sense. And that's just something that I had to realize. I really had to figure out that I had to stop sugarcoating things. And the reason why because I had gotten a bit uncomfortable, and I didn't want to do YouTube anymore. I got tired of, making these videos and sugarcoating things and trying to be nice about things that honestly, like transition. I'm just going to go back to transitioning kids, and I'm going to use that as my example. Like transitioning kids or identifying as an alien. And it's like, I would always say, it's like, like, you can identify as whatever you want to identify as long as you're not hurting anybody. And, like I respect you for who you are. Then I'd have to go back and backpedal and say, but, it's like, if you do this, it's like, I don't really feel like that's right. And, but I always had to state ahead of time that I had to sugarcoat things. I had to soften the blow for people when I would say things like that, because I didn't want to get canceled. And honestly, it's just gotten to a point now where I just don't give a shit. If somebody's being absolutely fucking stupid on the internet, I'm going to say they're being absolutely fucking stupid on the internet. If somebody does something in like the LGBT community or the feminism community or politics or anything, it doesn't even have to be the LGBT community. If I see something that I think is absolutely bonkers, I'm going to call you out on it, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it at all. I have accepted my supervillain role because, like I said, it's just, you will never make everyone happy. And if saying what I believe is sensible things, saying like we shouldn't be transitioning kids, you should seek therapy before you transition, you shouldn't self-diagnose yourself, if saying stuff like that, which to me makes sense, if saying that is going to make me the bad guy, then I don't want to be a good guy. I'd rather be the bad guy and speak my piece, and say what I have to say than just sugarcoat it, and say things that I don't actually believe. So I'm a supervillain now, I guess. Yeah, and it's all because I transitioned and then I detransitioned and then I got on the internet and everything got really, really hectic for me. There's a lot of stuff that I'm leaving out. Like I went through a massive Discord journey with some really crazy individuals that really changed my outlook on a lot of things. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I've dealt with and worked out, I guess, in my 2 years on YouTube. And if you guys want to hear more about those stories, I can definitely let you know and do other podcasts about those. But yeah, I think that's pretty much summarized it. I tried to be as detailed as possible. But yeah, honestly, guys, I think the thing that I'm going to just say the most is don't be afraid to be a supervillain, you know? Don't be afraid to say your piece because it doesn't matter what you say. Someone will always hate you for it. And so if somebody's always going to hate you, you might as well be true to yourself then, right? If somebody's always going to hate what you have to say, you might as well just be honest about it then, right? You know? So, God, I don't know. I don't really know what else to say about that. If you agree, if you're a fellow supervillain, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I know everybody says that, but I don't know. It's the internet. I'm trying to figure out how to YouTube, okay? But if you're viewing this on a different podcast platform, by the way, thank you very much. I appreciate your guys' support. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought. I tried to make this as ASMR-y, detailed and stuff, you know, as possible. But anyways, I think I'm going to end it here. Let me know if you guys are a fellow supervillain, any controversial takes and topics that you guys have. Like I said, I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. So, bye-bye.